January 2022. Meaning this is our first meeting in 22. I wish you all a happy new year and a prosperous one. Just to make you all aware, today's meeting will be recorded. Can I also welcome any members of the public and press to today's meeting? Can I kindly ask you to observe the meeting only and not to speak or participate? Can I please remind you all to switch your phones to silent for the duration of this meeting? In addition, can I refer you to the protocols of remote meetings which have been previously circulated, namely, your microphone should be switched to mute unless you are speaking. Should you wish to ask any questions or make any comments, can you please indicate either via the chat function or by raising your electronic hands via Teams. I will assume that you have all read the paperwork before us today. Prior to the meeting, please only use the chat function for indicating if you wish to speak as an alternative to the electronic hand function or to raise any technical issues. When asking a question, can you please indicate your page number you're referring to? The first item on the agenda is to do a roll call. I am Councillor Sheila Penry, the Chair, and I am present. I will now call on Chloe, the Democratic Service Officer, to take the roll call. Chloe, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I've marked you as present. Councillor Robert Wood.
Present, thanks, Chloe.
Councillor Howard Aubrey. Councillor Charlotte Galsworthy. Councillor Scott Jones.
Present, thank you, Chloe.
Councillor
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Adam McGrath. Councillor Wyndham Griffiths.
Present, Chloe.
Roslyn Davis.
Chloe, there's an awful somebody speaking in the background coming through to me.
I think
Right.
whoever has been muted now.
Right, carry on.
Thank you. Councillor Joe Hale.
Present, thank you, Chloe.
Councillor Simon Noyle.
I'm here, Chloe, thank you.
And Councillor Stephanie Lynch.
Present.
And then Cabinet members, Councillor Mike Carvey.
Present, Chloe.
And Councillor Annette Wingrave.
Present, Chloe.
And officers, Mike Roberts.
Present, Chloe.
Had apologies off Dave Griffiths. Peter Jackson.
Present, Chloe.
Hassan Hassan.
Present, Chloe.
Kevin Lewis.
Present, Chloe.
Present.
Stenlake.
Present, Chloe.
Tammy Davis.
Present.
Have I missed any officers who are participating in today's meeting?
Yeah, you missed. I think you missed
Oh,
James.
sorry,
Chloe,
James. Yep, James Davis. Mark you as present.
who is
Thanks, Chloe.
the new Neighbourhood Services Manager for any of the members who haven't met James before.
Thank you. I think that's everyone then, Chair. That's the roll call complete.
Thank you, Chloe. The next item is a Chair's announcement. I would like to announce for the information of officers and the public that we have 2 items on our scrutiny agenda which we'll be looking at. We have also chosen not to scrutinise any of the agendas on the Cabinet Board this morning. For those members who weren't in the pre-briefing, are there any other items that you wish to scrutinise? Agenda item 3 is declaration of interest. Can members please indicate whether they have any declaration in relation to the items that we have chosen to scrutinise today?
I see no hands, Chair.
No. Item 4 maintenance and management of the public playgrounds. The report on the maintenance and the management of public playground. This report is for information, and the report officers are Mr. James Davis and Mr. Mike Roberts. Do officers have anything to add, or shall we go straight to questions?
Just if I may start, Chair, just to say this is a report as requested by members of this scrutiny committee as part of your forward work programme. It deals with the management of playgrounds, 47 of them, which are within the council's remit. It doesn't cover those managed by other parties like town and community councils. I think you will appreciate services have been disrupted over the last couple of years, but you'll see I think the report is quite detailed. I don't propose to go through the appendix, which sets out the ongoing process of inspection and review that is in place to make sure that our playgrounds remain safe for everyone to use. That's all set out in great detail in the appendices. We do have a set out in the report. We have a mobile ranger who does weekly inspections of all the playgrounds. There's only a limited budget for it. The amount of budget within the revenue budget and neighbourhood services is set out in the report, and that leaves and the monies available for maintenance is also in the report. We've got about 30,000 in the budget per year to do replacement of equipment after the day-to-day management inspection and keeping everything safe is done. And one of the issues that's been set out in the report is there isn't a standing capital allocation for renewal of equipment. So we put in bids as and when required or annually in the budget process, which gets considered as part of the annual budget rounds. As also set out in the appendix, you will see that we have got a significant investment program going in the current year. We're in the hands a little bit of the supply chain in terms of everything arriving. Obviously, supply chains for all sorts of equipment in all sorts of work areas have been disrupted by the COVID pandemic, and the supply of equipment for play areas is no different to anything else. But you can see in terms of working with colleagues elsewhere and looking for match funding opportunities, and also working with Paul Hinder, with members who are looking to add additional investment and improvements to their playgrounds through their community funds. There is an investment programme of £350,000 as set out in Appendix B, currently ongoing. And we're also hopeful that as part of the budget process for next year, that there will be extra money, because that is also included, I believe, in the consultation that's out at the moment on the council's budget. So in terms of investment at the moment, looking good. And unless my colleague James, as the service manager, has anything to add, I'm sure we'd both be happy to take questions.
Thanks, Mike, and thank you, Chair. I just was one thing to add. This come in yesterday to update from one of the issues identified in the report on the number of swings that were removed from council playgrounds during 2020 as part of obviously meeting national social distancing measures. We've now received all the parts, apart from it's a handful of chains which are still required to put a couple of the cradle swings back up. So we're hoping the majority of these will be put back up in the next 2 weeks, with those that are remaining then up by hopefully the end of February.
Thank you. So we go now into questions. I got the Vice Chair. Did you want to ask anything on the playground areas, Vice Chair?
Chair, no, I'm on the fly tipping report. I wanted to ask a question. Thanks.
Councillor Scott Jones. You had a question down the playground.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mr. Roberts, I'm encouraged by the reporters here today in terms of the investment, that is being proposed out of this, out of the next financial year that's going into it. I mean, you may be aware I've raised numerous concerns over the years with the level of play parks that we've got. Obviously, 47, as you've referred to previously. Now, I am mindful that we've got community councils, that oversee a substantial amount of the parks within the Neath constituency, but ultimately within the Aberavon constituency in the main, I think that's where the lion's share of these particular parks are. Now, previously on budgets, obviously £30,000 a year to spend on maintenance isn't a significant amount of money, and I think that equates, as it states in the report, to £638 per play park out of the 47. I mean, that really doesn't do anything in terms of replenishing the play park. So it is good to see, that money is going in. But to be quite honest with you, even though you're advocating investment going into the next financial year, I'd like for the cabinet members that oversee this portfolio, and I'm sure they'll agree, the importance of play, part of education across our communities, and the need to have a strategic plan, really, a vision, over a 5, 10, 15, 25-year plan, maybe. Because if we don't, we're going to find ourselves in a disastrous position where, ultimately the council may have to make decisions further down the line of closing parks because of the lack of budget, finances or resources available to replenish such parks. So I'll leave it by there a minute, Chair, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Roberts or Mr. James, who's coming back?
I've got nothing to add, really, Chair, on that comment. Obviously,
Yes.
making things safe and keeping them in good order is what we're here to do. So, and obviously, budget is an issue for everybody on everything. So, I'm always happy to spend as much as I could be allocated for all these types of infrastructure.
Thank you. Councillor Hale.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for the report. I'd just like to say I agree with what Scott says. Unfortunately, anything to do with playgrounds costs so much money. I mean, I'm on the community council in Blaenhonddan, and we've spent hundreds of thousands on our parks to update them. And, it's constant that things get damaged or broken, and it just seems to be money all the time. But it's such a shame that lots of NPT parks, play parks, are just, left to go scruffy, and, it doesn't draw people to go there then, because people don't want to go and play in a park that hasn't got decent equipment, or, it's a shame that we can't get more money to refurbish our parks then. I don't expect the whole of them to be done, but when a piece of equipment is really bad, it needs to be replaced, doesn't it? But I'd just like to say thanks for the report anyway, and that I appreciate the work you do. Thank you.
Councillor, Mr. Roberts, do you want to come back on anything there? No, well, I call in then Councillor Ross Davis.
At present, do you have the personnel within the neighbourhood services for safety inspection and maintenance of equipment and playground?
Yes.
Right, well, from the chair, I have got a question to ask today. Is it possible? Now, as you know, out of our community funds in Neath East, we had three councillors. We have used our community funds for 2 years now to upgrade our playground areas. The problems we've got, we're having the plastic bins, vandalism, they light them up and put them on fire. I'm asking either you, Mr. James or Mike, is there any possibility that we can do away with the plastic bins and have the galvanizer or something that wouldn't alight? They wouldn't be able to put them, because we've had 4 new bins now put in Evans Playground in the last 2 months.
Yeah, I'm sure we can look at that. There's no point in putting something back that's being vandalised in that way, Councillor Penry.
Thank you ever so much for that, Mr. Roberts. Is there any other questions on the playground areas?
Chair, Councillor Ros Davis has still got her hand up.
Councillor Davis, is that a new hand or no? Right. Shall we move on now then? As you know, as previous mentioned, the item is for information. Therefore, we just need to note the report. Can I have somebody to move me noted the report?
I move, Chair.
Thanks.
I'll second, Chair.
We move on now then to item 5, litter, fly tipping and sideways enforcement. Mr. Roberts, are you taking?
Thank you, Chair. I don't propose to say too much. Again, this is another report that members of this committee have asked for as part of their forward work programme. I hope it provides all the information that you're looking for. It's setting out all the activity that we are doing in terms of enforcement in relation to sort of litter, fly tipping and side waste. And you'll see, though, that it is an area of work that has been significantly disrupted by the COVID situation for all sorts of reasons, whether that was the civic amenity sites being closed at times, whether it's been services like the bulky collection services that have been suspended, whether it's the whole sort of interview process that was halted in terms of doing the Police and Criminal Evidence Act interviews and being able to gather evidence and take prosecutions forward to court. That has been a significant disruption and wasn't possible for quite some time. And you can see in the report, in the figures that are in there, the disruption really that's happened, where we were increasing year on year and were the leading authority for taking fly tipping enforcements. We may well still be, albeit the numbers are reduced because everybody else would have experienced difficulties under the COVID pandemic as well. So I haven't got the current sort of national comparison for you. I'm sure there'll be those sorts of things will be available at the end of the or after the end of the financial year. But there's lots of detail in there, so I'm sure myself and James are happy to take questions, Councillor Penry.
Thank you for that. My Vice Chair, Councillor Rob Wood.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the report. It's very thorough there. I know we've had a great record on prosecutions over the years, sometimes being the top in Wales. My question relates to unadopted roads and areas where it's the land is under private ownership, where we have fly tipping incidents. Have we got a good relationship with the private landowners, or do we find that we need to possibly fine them for not taking action and getting rid of the rubbish that is dumped on their land? Thanks.
I think James might want to come in here, but some landowners respond better than others. Obviously, we do speak to them. A lot of them do respond, having been contacted by an enforcement officer, and will get the waste cleared. Others are more difficult, and and we have to issue enforcement notices. Some land is unregistered and is still very difficult to identify who the owner of that land is, and we work closely with people like the probation service, who we provide some funding to, and they will go into sort of unadopted areas and do community cleanup work in those sort of private but unidentified ownership areas. So we tackle them, those areas, just the same as the adopted areas.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lynch.
So just quick, I'd just like to
acknowledge that this is such a huge issue in my ward, Aberavon and Baglan Moors, and I felt it was really important to ask for this report because it is something that's kind of getting worse and worse. So I'd like to thank Mike Roberts and all the officers who were involved in this report and the work it all involves, because it does make such a huge difference. 1 minute, I know you can clear a lane, and the next minute you turn up the next day and it's a mess again. So thank you to the volunteers who litter pick as well and take time out their day. So I'd like to ask 4 questions, but don't worry, they're not overly complicated. So sorry about that. But I was pleased to read about the collection points. The officers are going to start to look at where litter is accumulating, and enforcement will regularly go to those collection points. Is it possible that I'm sure other councillors would like to do this as well, but is it possible that as a councillor in Aberavon and Baglan Moors, I help officers in that ward identify those collection points?
Certainly is.
Okay, thank you. That was an easy one. So the second question is, I met with officers earlier in the week to discuss this issue and the report that was coming. And something we did discuss is a huge issue with the enforcement is getting the right evidence, which I can completely understand. But it was also discussed that certain houses in the area, everyone, even officers, we kind of all acknowledge that we know it's that house, we just can't get the evidence. Are witness statements accepted as part of that evidence, or is it purely on paperwork in the bags?
I know witness statements have, I don't know if James has got the point. I know they have a role because we've had witness statements before, but I think there still has to be evidence. But that's something I can check with legal services in terms of what weight witness statements can carry.
Okay, thank
you.
you.
I believe we've been serving notices and routing through waste in your patch this week, I believe.
Yeah, it was really useful what the officers did, and they understand the issue that's here, and I just we'll get there eventually. So yeah, I'm thankful for that. So the third question, and I understand you might not be able to answer this straight away, but do the officers feel that the gated lanes in Aberavon kind of improve the issue or they compound it? And if there is a kind of unsure feeling on that, is it possible to do a pilot whereby maybe 1 or 2 gated lanes, the gates are actually removed? Because I do feel that's a strong feeling from the residents that they're actually making the issue worse.
Okay, I suppose you have to go back in history of why they were put in under the neighbourhood schemes 10 years ago or so now, and obviously crimes that were taking place, and the gating it was to deal with a sort of a lot of opportunistic crime, I think, with people that were going through the lanes. I think it's true that it needs to be recognised in some areas where everyone else has been excluded from the lane. It hasn't helped the situation with waste in those lanes, and you can only sort of draw a conclusion of where a lot of that waste is coming from.
Yeah.
And it has shutting that those gates made that worse. I mean, so it's something I'd be happy to look at. Obviously, the responsibility for the gates comes under the estate section, so we'd have to bring them in and liaise with them. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the situation is with the gating order and how that would work if the gates were removed, if there's a legal process or anything to go through. But we can certainly look at that and talk to you about what would happen if trials are good. You can do a trial and see what happens, and so something we're happy to talk to you about.
Thank you. And just the last question, it was something that residents from Baglan Moors has asked me to ask. Are officers in discussion at all with businesses in like KFC, Morrison's, McDonald's? The litter pickers there feel that there is a huge accumulation of waste from those businesses. So I was just wondering, A, whether officers were aware, and B, whether they can get in touch with those businesses and maybe some kind of push them to act a bit more responsibly with that litter.
Yeah, I don't know if James would like to comment. I mean, I know we've done it in the past, and certainly, like McDonald's and people, that some of them have their own litter patrols as well. But also, yes, roadside litter is an issue. It's a national issue. you know, we've talked in the past about when you buy a cup of coffee through the drive-through, you know, could it have the registration number sort of put on the side of it, because you'd soon find out, you know, where a lot of these items were coming from. James?
Yeah, I think on that one, Councillor Lynch, and I suppose the three previous as well, we'd be more than happy to work with you on these as well in terms of the review. The gates and the lanes, I suppose that's something we've got to do a bit of work on initially. But I suppose all four of those points that you've raised, we can work closely with you on them to try and make improvements in the area.
Thank you for that. Do you want to come back? Right. Councillor Hale.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask a question on how much extra is spent on our plastic recycling bins, because I'm getting constant reports that after the bin men put them back, they're not putting them back, they're throwing them and they're all getting broken. So I'd just like to know how much extra is spent, because it just seems to be, you know, colossal amounts of plastic. And do we actually recycle this plastic? Please.
Okay, well, we haven't come with that information today, Councillor Hale, but I'm sure we can do some analysis or certainly give you some factual details on what is spent. Historically, when we've changed bins and that type of thing, all those the bins that have gone in the recycling with the plastic. You know, when we change the wheelie bin sizes and when we've changed all sorts of things, anything that's become superseded, we do put it in the plastic. I can't say that every bin that is dealt with, say, by the refuse crew when they're picking up a food waste bin has gone in the recycling. I can't say that, but I know whenever we've had initiatives to change the system when we've been developing the system, any equipment that's become superseded, plastic equipment, has been taken for recycling.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis. Ros Davis.
First of all, I have to compliment the excellent enforcement officer that we've got locally, and I've worked very closely with him, and a lot of enforcement notices have been given out, and fines as well going to court. So I want to compliment the waste enforcement team on that. And regarding collection of recycling in particular, I get a lot of complaints regarding the mess left behind by the personnel themselves, and of course residents actually tell me, well, that is fly tipping.
Who's going to answer that question, James or Mike?
I mean, all I can say is I have told the supervisors that I'm not getting that many complaints, but I am getting some, and the number that I'm getting is too many. So I've raised that with the supervisors to do that. We do sometimes get complaints because we've got the CCTV all round on the vehicles, and sometimes we get complaints, and sometimes we look at the film afterwards, and it's not justified in terms of the complaints that some people put in a complaint, and there might be one piece of cardboard that's come, a small piece that's come out with something, but other times, though, judging by the information that we've had, there is waste that's been spilt that should have been dealt with, and I've taken that up with the supervisors. And one of the things that's happening with the this resilience extra monies that the council is putting in, we're putting an extra charge hand into the waste service to free up more supervisor time to actually get out there and make sure that services are provided as you would like to see and as members of the public would like to see, and ensuring that the bins and everything are put back where they should be, and that type of thing. I mean, again, we have had some disruption. We had a lot of, at one point, had 40 people off recently with the current wave with COVID in the waste service. So it's there has been disruption with having to relocate redeploy people to crews that aren't normally on crews and bring in extra agency people, and that definitely has an impact when you don't have stability in the crews. But I'm glad to say that that number's now shrunk significantly, and things are sort of getting back to a position of good stability. So, but I do recognise that we have been getting some complaints, and I have taken that up, and hopefully this extra supervision will also help to make sure everything's as it should be.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because it's been going on for years, even before COVID disruption, to be fair.
So you're happy on the answer you've had of the officer? Right, I ask now Councillor Scott Jones.
Thank you, Chair. It's a quick observation and a quick question, I suppose. I mean, firstly, I want to thank our refuse and recycling team, because they've done a fantastic job in very, very difficult and unprecedented times during the pandemic. And of course, the rates are still increasing out there. However, at the same time, I want to make reference really to Mr. James Davis. I've had a couple of opportunities of meeting with him, and I find that he's a breath of fresh air coming into the role in neighbourhood services. But Mr. Robert, there is a little bit of an issue really that I want to address, and I'm happy to discuss directly with you if there's a need, because I do appreciate James's portfolio workload, across a number of different areas in his service. But, for members to have to wait to get a response in terms of refuse and recycling from officers for 5 or 6 weeks isn't acceptable, on straightforward answers. And I sometimes don't always feel that it should be the service manager picking up all these emails, What I do want to avoid as well is members having to put in freedom of information requests, because ultimately we've got a job to do in terms of scrutinising across the county borough. And of course, there is timescales around responses to officers, and let's hope going forward that we can have responses relatively quickly, or as quick as we can really. So there is a bit of a concern around that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor.
Could I just add, Chair, if so?
Oh, yes,
just to mention, I mean, I updated the contact list not so long ago and circulated it to all the members, the street care contact list, and you will see in there that one of the issues we've got is that the waste service manager post is currently vacant. We did advertise it, and we made an appointment, and the person withdrew, unfortunately. So it's the post is out again at this very moment for recruiting. So hopefully we'll soon have a new manager in place, and I'll certainly be raising your concerns with them. And of course, the fact that we haven't got a manager and we've got ad hoc interim arrangements in place, probably does mean that it's not, some of the issues are not getting the level of attention that they should be, and that may also lead to some delays, that because there isn't a service manager in some of the responses to you. So please be assured it's nothing deliberate. We're dealing with some personnel issues, and hopefully we'll soon have a new full-time manager in place, and they can follow up on any concerns that you have.
Thank you for that. Cabinet member, Councillor Mike Harvey, did you want to come in?
Yeah, if I could, please, Chair. A couple of points. So I'm delighted again with James's appointment to this side of the environment. I was devastated to lose him from drainage, because he's a huge help to me with the flood, especially in with skewing. But obviously, it's a tremendous appointment for this section. Couple of points with the waste being dropped on streets. I know, when you look at the amount of waste that's collected right through Neath, Talbot, there's bound to be 1 or 2 bits of cardboard or other waste that goes, on the streets. I've seen it myself, and I've spoken to it, and anybody, let's take it up and have a look at it. As Mike said, the crews are aware there's CCTV on the wagons, and if it's happening with the same crew, it can be investigated. Obviously, sometimes it depends on the weather, if there's wind or whatever, but we're aware of that. And it has been addressed and will continue being addressed with Scott's comments about the letters not being responded to. You know, I see a lot of the emails come in requesting information on this subject. I say the majority are responded to immediately. I know if I get copied in anything, I chase it up. But if any members have got any, you know, questions been outstanding for a while, then email myself and I'll become involved and chase it up for you. You know, sometimes I've had to do it, you know, for different councillors, and I've done it, and then you get the response. But more often than not, the volume of emails comes through on this topic is absolutely massive. So I think 1 or 2 would be missed. So come to me as cabinet member, and I'll chase it up. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Wyndham-Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, there we are.
I see. Well, thanks for the report, by the way. It's a good piece of work by all concerned. One of the things that's creeping in at the moment with waste, and I see it is, and I've had a discussion with officers, is people are now, instead of putting an extra bin, a bag with the bins, they're going around and putting it in our bins, which are located throughout the authority. It's becoming around the Brinkhook area quite a problem. The bins which people, when they're out walking, are able just to drop something in, a chock-a-block with people's household refuse. And I know this is going on right throughout the borough, because I've had a discussion with officers, and they've actually were or have taken bins away from lay-bys around the area because people are pulling into lay-bys, chucking their rubbish in and filling them up and dropping bags by our bins. I just wondering if, for enforcement of that, if we can periodically sort of, if we've got the equipment, put a camera out there to see if we can catch them, because I think it is a problem that's not going to go away. Thank you, Chair.
Would either of the officers like to come back on that question?
Well, I think we could certainly look at whether we can deploy a covert camera in some places. This is where we also link with the training, where we go for the duty of care notices with businesses to make sure all the businesses have got proper contracts in place, because you've got potential for businesses doing that as well as any residents. So you know, this is why we're keen to make sure we see the duty of care paperwork for all businesses, so that we can see that they've got proper arrangements in place. Because in terms of residents, this has been an ongoing and long-term process of behavioural change for us all, in going from what was 15 years ago almost a completely throwaway sort of position to a situation now where we've got nearly, you know, we are approaching this statutory target of 70% recycling. And when you think of the thousands and thousands of tons of material, waste material, that is an incredible achievement. And you can see in the figures on the last reviews how we, you know, 10 years ago maybe had 40% participation. Last time we did the review, we were in at 80% odd, and I believe that figure's going up, and we're doing some preparatory work ready for the next review later on this year with the new council, because we'll be looking at the waste strategy again, and we would hopefully bring in you refreshed information about the material that's been thrown away and the number of people that are participating. And of course, a lot of these issues, they're where people are not participating in the recycling, or they're not, you know, taking advantage where they would be entitled to have, you know, an exemption because they're actually producing non-recyclable waste in excess of the sort of bin. So there's no reason why people should do it, really, I don't believe. But we're in a long process of behavioural change, you know, because then we still have the target ultimately in 2050. The national target is no waste. So this is going to be a long journey for us all in adapting the way we live to absolutely minimise the amount of waste that we throw away and maximise the use of any materials that we use.
Thank you for that. Is there any other questions to the officers?
Chair, I think the cabinet member would like to come in.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Wingrave. I missed your hand there.
It's only just gone up, don't worry. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I don't know if it'll help members regard to Wyndham's query about the litter bins. In my ward, I had two areas. One part where people would pull in from the roadside and fill the bins up with household waste. And another area, which the first litter bin they came across was one after the Burger King. And I've got a marvellous litter picking team in my ward. And they came to me and said, look, these two bins are always overflowing and we fill 2 or 3 bags just on those 3 bins. So I spoke to officers, they suggested removing the bins and I took a chance. We removed them, no litter at all in those areas whatsoever. So after about 4 or 5 months, we put them back. And again, the litter started spilling all over the floor. So we've removed them permanently now. And my litter crew are picking up 50% less litter in the ward. So sometimes it is a case of educating people, even if they don't realise you're doing it. It's take up in the way and they walk past with their litter and they take it home. So sometimes it's worth a try. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I can't see anybody else that wishes to ask any questions to the officers.
I'm here, Chair.
Who's that?
Charlotte.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you, Charlotte. I call in Councillor Charlotte Goldsworthy.
Thanks. Sorry I'm late. In all honesty, I got my Fridays mixed up. I thought this was next Friday. So just to say, basically, I think the side waste officers and everyone have done fantastic. As most know, I actually love a bit of waste. There's no complaints in my ward, and I think that someone obviously have said about the litter pickers. I think during COVID, when we've really pushed on the litter pickers helping out, and that's not just in our 1 or 2 wards, that's across the borough now. It's a lot of people see that as therapeutic, meeting friends, everything. It's a lot more to it than just collecting the waste. It's about changing the mindset, about taking pride in our communities as well. The fly tipping obviously is a problem, and looking at them figures, it's basically jumping out. And even though I know about all of the COVID and that, I still don't think that the tip system is the best system now at all. I still don't agree with that. And I think that is got something to do with the fly tipping increases. But what we're up against is the educated fly tippers, whereas it's a lot of rubble, it's a lot of the plastics and that, which IDs are not in. So it's not just like the general black bag and oh yeah, you can get a letter, or the bit of cardboard. You will actually get them on in the lanes, like in Steph's ward and things like that. But I think as well we've got to really push on the prosecutions. I think we've been a bit sort of easy on the individual prosecutions, whereas we've been good on the bigger prosecutions. So that's my bit. But apart from that, well done. I think as a borough, and as my new role is actually waste in Swansea, I'm proud to say I'm a councillor in Neath Talbot, because it's going the right way, and I'm really proud to say that. So I tell them all. So well done. That's me.
Thank you ever so much for that. I don't think there's anything the officers would like to come back on that. No. So this item is for monitoring. Therefore, we just need to note the report. Item 6. The next agenda is for the Cabinet Board. As I said in my announcement at the beginning, we don't intend to scrutinise anything from the Cabinet Board. We are quite happy for it to go direct to the Cabinet. I ask you now to go back to your papers, to scrutiny, and item 7 is the forward work programme. Chloe, have you got anything to add to this?
Thanks, Chair. No, that's just for noting. As you can see on the agenda, there's one item scheduled for the next meeting, which is the 11th of March, which is a joint report on subway and footway maintenance.
Thank you ever so much for that. Item 8, urgent items. There are no urgent items today. So that leaves me to close the meeting, to thank you all members for your attending, and to wish James all the best, and not to put up too much aggro off the councillors.